Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Have you ever dreamed of having some shocking surprise completely change your life? Whether the surprise is good or bad, your life will never be the same again. I have a story to tell you about this very thing. My name is Tiffany, and I'm 21 years old. I live with my parents and an occasional mystery guest, whose role in our lives I have yet to ascertain. I would see him from time to time. I assumed that he was some down on his luck guy whom Dad helped once. Dad was wealthy and often donated money to help the poor. This mystery man would try to talk to me whenever he would spend a few days with us. I didn't understand why Dad allowed him to stay at our home sometimes. It was bizarre, and it did creep me out a little. There was one time when he opened the door to my room while I was sleeping. He sat on the bed next to me for a while and then left. I was half awake at the time, but I didn't move. When I told my parents about this, they said they would speak with him, but I'm not sure they ever did. I felt uneasy about the situation, so I decided to investigate this matter myself. I had to figure out who this mystery man was and why he stayed with us periodically. One day, Mom wasn't feeling well, and Dad drove her to the doctor's office to be checked out, leaving me home alone. I sneaked into the office to have a look around, see if I could find something about this strange man. While I was searching, I heard a voice behind me. I thought it was my parents, but it was the mystery man. He was smiling at me. It made me feel awkward. He said hi. I stepped back and said, "If you take one step closer, I'll scream." He said, "Calm down. You're suffering from an illness, and I need you to fight it for me and for your parents." "What are you talking about? I feel fine," I said. He said, "You don't recognize me. I'm your husband." Shocked, I grabbed the phone to call the police, but he stopped me. "Don't do that. I won't hurt you. But I won't leave either." I started screaming loudly. Just at that time, my parents returned and entered the study. I shouted for them to help me. Dad came over and hugged me. Then I felt a needle prick the back of my neck, and I lost consciousness. I woke up in a hospital bed, with my parents and my so-called husband beside me. I asked them what was going on. They told me that I must have been dreaming, that I had just woken up from a week-long coma, induced by a rare type of brain disease that damaged my long-term memory. My husband hugged me and told me that he loved me. If only I knew who he was.
I believe in the metaphysical world and that there are many mysteries that we don't understand yet, like souls, ghosts, and black magic. Are there really evil spirits who wish to do us harm? Well, I may have an answer for you. My name is Ralph, and I am 15 years old. My life became a journey to study the metaphysical world. My parents always told me that reading books about the supernatural world would mess with my mind, but I didn't care. My friends share my interest in the occult. I remember the first time we tried to summon a spirit. We drew a pentagram on the floor and placed black candles at the points of the star in preparation for the ceremony. After the ceremony started, we waited for a spirit to appear, but all we summoned was a small rat. Even so, we were afraid of rats, so it was still a scary experience for us, but not in the way we expected. In our second experiment, we tried to summon the soul of a girl named Mary. Although it was a fun ritual, not much happened. The power went out and we reclosed a breaker and the lights came back on. Then we heard the voice of a small girl crying and the voice of some woman saying, "No one can get into my forbidden area." We all screamed and ran away, but then we learned later that this was just the TV that we had heard. But that doesn't mean that supernatural events never happen. Don't forget that. In our third experiment, we tried to communicate with creatures from the planet Uranus by sneaking into a clinic that belonged to a friend's father and connecting an electrocardiograph machine to a girl's hands and feet. I thought she was going to die, but she recovered. Now, you may say that I'm experiencing hallucinations and that all our failed attempts could be explained away by normal phenomena. But what I am going to tell you may make you change your mind and your notions about the afterlife. On Independence Day, we were traveling up north to visit our aunt. Along the way, we stopped at a gas station next to a gypsy camp. The gypsies were gyrating in some kind of wild dance to the rhythm of tambourines, as if they were doing some macabre ritual of black magic and voodoo. At least that's what it looked like to me. I thought it was cool and imagined myself living the life of a carefree gypsy. Among them was a woman with tattoos all over her body. As we pulled into the gas station, she was staring at me intently, and I felt strange, as if her gaze had affected me in some way. After stopping at the gas station, Dad and I got out of the car, and I was surprised when the tattooed gypsy woman approached me and presented me with a cute black cat in a small metal cage. I knew that superstitious people feared black cats and believed them to be omens of bad luck, but personally I disagreed with them. Cats are cats, regardless of the color of their fur. I thought she was trying to sell it to me and asked her how much it cost. She told me that it was a present given to me for free. I thanked her and she turned and left. Dad finished filling up the car's gas tank and we drove away. My parents were surprised when they saw that I had magically gained a black cat in a cage, so I explained what had happened with the gypsy woman. Dad didn't like the cat's black color. He said it looked so dour and gloomy. Just as Dad said that, the cat turned its head towards Dad and hissed at him, as if he took offense at the comment about his fur. When we got home, I opened the cage and let the cat out. It walked around the flat and seemed to be looking for something. Mice, probably. I made it a cozy bed from a blanket and gave it some food. We played together for a bit. Though I had thought it cute before, its movements and features started to strike me as predatory or hostile in some way. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I shrugged it off, thinking that we'll get used to each other in a few days. Later, I began noticing that it had a quirky knack for disappearing and reappearing, as if by magic. At times, I would hear the cat meow as if it were glaring at something. But when I would try to see what it was looking at, there was nothing there. One evening, after visiting a friend, I went home and wanted to get some sleep. Normally, the cat would sleep beside me, but on this particular day, I couldn't find it anywhere. Suddenly, the power and lights went out, and all I could see was darkness. I heard something moving along the wall. I scrabbled around and found a flashlight and shined around. There was the cat. Its reflective eyes shined white, and its canine teeth loomed large like tiger fangs. Big and conspicuous, and ready to bite into something juicy. It was glaring at me as if I were that juicy something, but I yelled at it, and it retreated. My parents had come to see what was going on, so I pointed at Sparky. I had named the cat Sparky, and told them that Sparky seemed like he wanted to attack me. But they paid me no heed. Later that night, I was trying to go to sleep when I suddenly noticed that Sparky was lying right next to me. I broke out in a cold sweat. When I told my parents about Sparky's magical appearance at my bedside, they told me that I was just sleep deprived and that I would feel better after getting some sleep. I finally got to sleep and dreamed that I was in a dark house shining a flashlight around and that Sparky was getting ready to attack me again. I woke up with a start and found Sparky sleeping next to me. I told Mom about my nightmare, but she brushed it off as a bad dream or indigestion from dinner. Then one day, my parents had to visit one of our relatives, and so left me home alone with Sparky. I was really nervous. I tried to find Sparky, intending to return it to that darn gypsy woman, but it pulled its disappearing act again and couldn't be found. That night, my parents were outside when the lights went out again. Again, I heard a sound. Shined the light, saw Sparky with the white eyes and large fangs glaring at me as if ready to pounce on me and attack. Deja vu. I must have fainted because later I woke up to find my parents standing beside me, shaking me to wake me up. They looked worried. I told them about Sparky in the dark, ready to attack again. I asked where Sparky was, but they didn't know. We searched for it everywhere, but couldn't find it. After that day, I began feeling better. Had I been dreaming? Had I been hallucinating? Was it just my imagination? Was Mom right about my books on the supernatural messing with my mind? Sitting, I sighed and dropped my hand to my side. It fell upon something warm and fuzzy. Sparky was there.
You know, sometimes the truth is even stranger than fiction, especially if you had a dark secret in your life that would put you in danger if it were exposed. Such was my case, and this is my story. My name is Charlotte, and I'm 17 years old. I live with my mom. My dad passed away before I was born, so my mom had to raise me all by herself. My mom knew everything about me. my school studies, my friends. She had certain rules that I was supposed to follow, like eating outdoors was forbidden, and I can't be friends with someone unless she knew everything about them first, and so on. I thought these rules were somewhat paranoid, and I asked her why she placed such restrictions on making friends. Her reply was simply that you can't trust anyone nowadays. But that wasn't a very satisfying answer. And when I asked her what it meant, she didn't say anything further. As I was growing up, these rules mystified me even more, and I couldn't help but wonder if they had anything to do with my father, whom I knew nothing about. Mom always said he was a troublemaker, and she told me that everything would be clear to me in time. One holiday, I joined a new band. We held a lot of concerts. It was the best. I was good at playing music and singing. When we went camping, we met some students from other countries. We made a lot of new friends and had fun together. We even had a chance to increase our band's fame and reputation. After our first performance at camp, an Asian girl approached me. She hugged me, saying, "Charlotte, I missed you a lot." Taken aback, I asked, "Do I know you?" She surprised me again by saying, "Don't you recognize me? I'm Mary, your friend." I smiled and replied, "You must be mistaken. I don't know you." After insisting that she was indeed my friend, she excused herself and ran back to join her friends. Weird. Though, now that I think about it, I have often had an eerie feeling that someone was watching me wherever I went. I tried to shake off this feeling many occasions, but I never could. I would just tell myself that it must be my imagination. That night, we all went into the jungle. It was a jungle tour. It was very dark, and I got separated from the group and found myself alone, surrounded by trees. I called out to my friends, but no one heard me. Suddenly, I bumped into someone, a girl it seemed, and I apologized. When I turned around to look at her, I was shocked to see, well, myself, or my double. It was as if I was looking in a mirror. "Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Charlotte," she replied simply. "That's impossible. I'm Charlotte," I said assertively. "Are you with us here at the campsite?" "Yes," she said. I asked her which way back to the campsite. She pointed in one direction and we headed back. As we were walking, her phone rang. It was her father. He was worried about her and was just making sure she was okay. We arrived at our tents without incidents, and I said, "It was really nice to meet you, Charlotte. I'll see you tomorrow." I felt a strong connection to the girl for some reason. Then I realized that I had forgotten my bag, and I went to get it. And again, I had that ominous feeling that I'm being watched. Suddenly, something hit me on the head. When I woke up, I found myself sitting in a car, surrounded by people wearing sunglasses, and I was really frightened. "Who are you people?" I demanded to know. "And what do you want from me?" One man told me that my dad was the reason they kidnapped me. When I told him that my dad had died a long time ago, he just laughed. Then he sprayed something on my face and I lost consciousness. When I woke up later, the other Charlotte was tied up beside me. One of the men seemed confused, seeing two of me, and he asked his boss which of us was the girl they were looking for. Suddenly, I heard someone shout, "Freeze! Don't move!" The police had come. They came out from the tree line. Surrounding the car, they arrested the men. Then they untied us both. Someone appeared looking very worried. The other Charlotte started coming too, and asked where she was and what was going on. Then she saw her dad, and she ran to him. Her dad then looked at me and asked for my name and my mother's name. When I told him, he said he knew who I was, and said to send his regards to my mom, and to tell her that he was still keeping her secret. Then he gave me a medal and hugged me, saying that he wasn't sure if we would ever meet again. I was still staring at him, looking confused, so he smiled and he asked me where my father was, and I told him that my father was dead. And then he said that that was their agreement, he and my mom, that he was only trying to protect me and the other Charlotte, who happened to be my twin sister. He said he got into some trouble in his line of work. Some people threatened to kill us, so he and my mom decided to split us up. "She took you, and I took your twin sister," he said. "We did this to keep you safe. I named your twin Charlotte, just the same as you." I was still feeling a bit overwhelmed at this point. This was preposterous. I couldn't believe it. Suddenly, I heard someone calling me. Charlotte, wake up! It's time for a trip. You must have been having a nightmare because you were screaming. I woke up to find myself in the tent with my friend. When I went outside the tent, I stopped. Right in front of me, staring me in the eyes, was a girl who was my mirror image. He was a dream, the future, or so I thought. But my love was cursed right from the start. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Let me explain. But first, I should probably introduce myself. I'm Carolyn. I was a dreamer. I dreamed of a good, warm, stable, successful life. I wanted a good job. And I wanted to travel around the world a bit with Helen. She was my best friend. We virtually shared the same dreams and hobbies and interests and lifestyles. We've been friends since we were kids. People often thought that we were sisters. I did too, in fact. She even got jealous if anyone tried to get close to me. Every day, Helen and I worked a little more towards our dreams. Once, when Helen and I were traveling with some of our friends, we had a problem with the hostess on the plane. A gentleman intervened and cleverly solved our problems. His name was Danny. I liked him. A lot. I thought about him often. But whenever I talked to Helen about him, she told me that he was not as amazing as I seemed to think he was. Coincidentally, I met him again at a party of a mutual friend. We talked together till daylight. I told Helen about our encounter, and she expressed her wishes that my love story would have a happy ending. I similarly told her that I hoped she would find the love of her life someday too. Everything would be okay, we figured. Then, one day, I received a letter in our mailbox. It was in weird handwriting, as if the writer had written it with a trembling hand. I opened it curiously. It said that my love for Danny would become a curse if I didn't give him up and get him out of my life. What nonsense, I thought. Whose idea of a silly joke was this? I immediately called Danny and Helen to tell them about the letter. Danny laughed, but Helen was worried and suggested that I should be careful from now on. That same day, Danny had a horrible car accident, but fortunately he wasn't hurt. A detective investigating the case determined that his car brakes had been tampered with. In another incident, a car almost hit me, but it swerved away at the last minute. When I mentioned this incident to Danny, he tried to calm me down and told me to just forget about it. He gave me a beautiful bracelet as a present and proposed. We got engaged, and I couldn't have been happier. I wanted to show the bracelet to Helen, but somehow I seemed to have lost it. I couldn't find it anywhere. Anyway, when I told Helen about his proposal, she was thrilled for me. I spent days shopping for just the right wedding dress. I was so busy with preparations that I forgot all about the ominous letter. I went to the wedding hall early to make sure that everything was ready and prepared. Helen was helping me, and Danny kept calling me to make sure I was all right. Suddenly, the lights went out. I called out to Helen, worried that she might have tripped and fallen when the lights were out. When the lights came back on, Helen had fainted, and my dress had disappeared. I screamed to the ceiling, "What do you want from me? Leave me alone!" Suddenly, Danny appeared out of nowhere and asked me what had happened. I told him then and there that we must break off our engagement, otherwise the curse the letter mentioned might injure someone or cause someone to die. Then Helen came too and tried to calm me down. She told me to go to the car and that she would get our stuff and follow me. I loved Danny and wanted to marry him, but now I was seriously worried that this curse threat might actually be real. Helen came back carrying a bag and a large suitcase and told Danny not to worry, that she would drive me home and then call him to tell him that we had arrived safely. I was still crying, and Helen was trying to calm me down. When we arrived home, I noticed something strange. Helen was carrying a bag that was partially open, and I glimpsed a piece of clothing stuffed into it. It looked exactly like my dress. I opened the bag and found that it was my dress. I confronted Helen and demanded to know how my missing dress ended up in her bag. I clearly caught her red-handed, and she was unable to answer coherently. I realized at that moment that the source of the so-called curse was Helen. "Helen," I said, "how dare you do this to me? I thought we were like sisters to each other." She replied icily, with a glare that I saw for the first time. She said that she fell in love with Danny just as I did, but he chose me instead of her, and that she hated me for it. She said she won him over and got him to love her instead. Then they both tried to scare me into calling off the wedding so that she and Danny could be together. There are no words to describe how I felt at the time. I replied in a similar tone. I told her that I don't ever want to see her again, or Danny. Neither of them mattered anymore. I never did see Helen or Danny after that day. I'm on a Caribbean island now, sipping on a cocktail. I read in the paper that Danny and Helen had announced their engagement. I'm thinking about what wedding present I should give them as a surprise.
I do not panic. I simply take a breath, sit down on a stone bench nestled against some building I read about once, but can't remember the name of, and scan my cartoony tourist map for anything that looks familiar. But nothing. Give me a little credit though. Having grown up in a town with a population of just under 2,000 people, a town with a farmland and no streetlights, I am a country bumpkin who's been dropped off in a major city. I'm lucky I haven't wandered off the cliffs by now, only 2 days into my semester abroad. But culture shock is one of the main reasons I came to Dublin. So even though it is terrifying and unfamiliar, I know that living in another country for 5 months will definitely help me grow. As they say, the real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having the new eyes. The weather in Ireland changes quicker than a middle school crush. By now the sky has turned a shade of grey and raindrops are beginning to spatter onto the map in my hands. I had been warned of the rain, repeatedly, before coming. It always falls softly at first, quiet as a page being turned, delicate as lace, but that's all just foreplay. When the wind comes, and it always does. It's no matter though. Studying in this city was one of my greatest desires and I knew the weather was part of the package. Dublin was meant to be experienced in the rain. The streets are full of people. I wonder if they can smell the tourist on me. I've been in Dublin for roughly 48 hours and it has yet to feel like home. Maybe it's because I haven't had time to unpack, eat a full meal, or even think. At one point, I was awake for 35 straight hours and learned that there is a little difference between delirium and insanity. To fight the chaos, I cling to the moments of serenity and hoard them like poker chips I can cash when things become too hectic. My most peaceful moment came on the plane ride here. The flight went by quickly. The wind was at our backs and the stars were ahead. As we approached, the Dublin skyline lit up like an artificial constellation. My heart was filled with promise knowing that it would soon beat along with the city's pulse. And even though I have yet to feel at peace, my heart continues to say, you will, you will, you will. The rain stops, umbrellas are tucked away, ready to be drawn when the moment calls again. I think a small part of me likes being lost. I know that if I really wanted to, I could ask any of the passers-by where I am or where I need to go. Everyone I've met so far has been so nice they'd likely offer me a ride there and a pint along the way, let alone directions. It seems strange by European standards, but the Irish people love Americans. And I mean love. They love Americans the way Americans love themselves. They want to know where I am from in the States, and what it's like there, and what brought me to their neck of the woods. All of it. And they really listen, absorbing every word and filtering them as willingly as if it was oxygen. There are bound to be some bad people here in Ireland because there are bad people everywhere. But with an open mind and a positive outlook, they're hard to find. Ireland as a whole is a country I've long idealized. Its postcards should be hung in the Louvre. Its culture is so rich. It is also home to my favorite writers, as well as my ancestors. I seldom contemplated my heritage before going abroad. Since I'm not of one ethnicity, I never had one predominant country to identify with. My family tree is like a European Union cocktail. Equal parts Irish, English, German, with just a splash of Dutch, shaken and not stirred. Living in Ireland briefly has changed that. I feel a part of it. I feel it in the words of the Irish people. I feel it in the quiet that hangs over the treeless forever-reaching fields. And I feel it in the river as it churns. endlessly dark and endlessly deep. So, as I sit on the same stone bench, gazing at the same animated map, I realize I'd rather be lost here in Dublin than be found anywhere else in the world.